Hello? Hello, hello? Well, if you're hearing this, you're probably in for a very, very long podcast episode. Greetings, everyone. This is the Hipster Snek, and with me today is my co-host, Dietaku.
You can only find me if you click on the TV remote 3 times, but only on the third night.
That's more accurate than you know. Because today, we're going to get into a big one tonight, and let's cover some nerd news real quick, because it's something that you and I have been talking about all day. As of this recording, it's only been a few short days since the passing of Akira Toriyama, which is a big loss to all the nerds out there. Dragon Ball is one of the most influential manga ever created, and it is a shame. The world is poorer for it.
Mm-hmm. I would dare say, as trite as it is, if we're ignoring, when I was very, very young and I watched Kasharn, I really probably should not have seen Kasharn. Dragon Ball, OG Dragon Ball was basically my first anime. So, I really would not be the weeaboo I am today without Dragon Ball. That means without Akira Toriyama. So, I hope he's in gag manga heaven.
Yeah.
Poking poop and making bad jokes.
He is, and he's in good company. A lot of manga authors passed away in the past few years. So, hopefully they're up there together and they can finally take a vacation and not have to worry about editors and deadlines.
No, I was about to say, I am not kidding you. Like the night before I got the message for it, I was thinking to myself, I'm like, how long has it been since OG Dragon Ball? Like the mid 80s? It's like, man,
Yep.
Akira Toriyama is not a spring chicken anymore. And literally the next morning, I went on to Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
And I saw him like, we're so sorry to inform you that, Akira Toriyama has passed away. I'm like, oh no. Oh no.
Mother of God.
I'm sorry. I might have cursed him.
No. That's thought action fusion. That's not real. It's a shame. And like, he was not a young man, no, but like he wasn't really an old man. You can tell how stressful the world of being a manga author is, because most of these guys don't get into really advanced age.
Well, from what I understand, he died of complications that were basically brain cancer. So, it might have been, brought on by stress. Like I can tell you that, like, what happened with me was they're like, yeah, you probably, the fact that, you were, the situation that was going on, you didn't have a job at the time.
Yeah.
I was basically doing like double shifts in order to keep things together, didn't help. That definitely, I think that may have brought that on. So yeah, I think now I'm thinking about it, yeah, it might have been exacerbated by that.
Yep. And
definitely didn't help, I don't think.
It's a rough lifestyle. Like, especially the demands of success can be some of the most stressful things these authors can encounter. So like, remember, ladies and gentlemen, show some love to the authors that you follow, because they probably need all they can get.
Yeah, I suppose it just kind of goes to show you that Araki is indeed actually a immortal vampire, because the guy basically did what Toriyama did, but for 30 years. And the dude looks fantastic, and his output is just insane.
It is. He has the stone mask, man. I'm telling you.
Yeah, it's going to be at the end of time, him and Keanu Reeves are going to wage war for, the destiny of the universe.
Not just them, dude. Have you seen Weird Al Yankovic? He looks younger today than he did in the 80s. It is uncanny. We're going to have a three-way power struggle between them at the end of space and time.
One of them is going to be, one of them's law, one of them's chaos, and the other one's balance, but we don't know who's who.
It's unclear exactly who would be who.
Yeah.
That's leave a comment down below between Weird Al Yankovic, Keanu Reeves, and Hirohiko Araki. Which one's law, which one's chaos, and which one's neutral, and what's your rationale?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So, I don't have any other nerd news. Do you?
Apparently, Dune 2 came out, and everyone's saying it's really good. And because of that, there was just an announcement for Dune Awakening, which is an MMO. And,
that's right. You mentioned that.
I'm just going to say there's a lot of talk about how it's going to change the lore, and I'm going to be real. I admit that, I am one of those weirdos that actually understands when they're like, yeah, we're changing the lore. And they're talking about laser interactions with shields. And they're talking about the lack of a sand walk, and the fact that they're not going to go into the deep, contextual, speak of religion,
right?
And I understand all that because I honestly there was a period in my life where I basically read Dune every year. Really should read it again. It is one of my favorite books. I'd say probably my favorite book. But I understand why they didn't do that, because honestly, the entire irregular gate, that sandwalk, it's the way it's described in the book, would be really annoying to just be right behind your character and they're like, walk, walk, stop, walk, 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 stop, walk, walk. And it's like, that, oh my God, can I just walk
like a normal person?
Yeah, it's but the thing is though, is that if you're being completely law accurate, just walking normally would summon sandworms. So,
right.
And the entire thing about, lasers and shields don't interact the way they do. But a level 1 person with a laser could run up to a max level person with a shield and be like, get wrecked, nub, and shoot the laser at them, and then both characters blow up.
Yeah.
And yet, the level 1 character, he's out nothing. The level max character is like, what the heck just happened?
My everything.
Yeah, so I understand why they did what they did. I am honestly looking forward to this game. I just hope that the voice and that all the Bene Gesserit wackery do is, in game, because that's honestly what I want to play as. I just, using the, basically, are you familiar with Dune at all there, Professor?
No. I'm completely in the dark.
Okay. So, effectively in the far future, this is just a very quick TLDR.
All right.
Effectively in the far future, and, stop me if you've heard this one before, there is a pseudo feudal society run by these great houses that are all waging war with each other, all presided over by this great emperor. But they have to do so within the fact that space travel is incredibly heavily regulated by this organization called the Spacing Guild, which effectively runs all commerce, because they are the only people that actually know how to use the interstellar Holtzman drive, which is basically how you go faster than light. And the only way they ultimately know how to go faster than light is their navigators have to consume a substance called spice. And the only place to find the spice is the planet Arrakis. And wouldn't you know it, planet Arrakis is not a very nice place to live. It's a giant desert. And if you go into the deep desert, then you start encountering these things called sandworms. And sandworms are really annoying because you can't kill them with conventional weapons. You can't use lasers on them. They basically, they will eventually die if you use like artillery or lasers on them. But it takes a huge amount. And the problem is that once again, they live out in the deep desert, which is where all the spice is. And so, and if you collect spice, they start to show up. If you have a rhythmic motion, like say walking, they show up and they just will consume everything that they can. Not good. The thing is, though, interesting thing is that you can poison them. And you know how you poison them? Water, ironically.
Okay.
Yeah, which is actually there's an entire thing where like later on they learn that there's these effectively like part lichen, part roundworm creatures called little makers. And effectively what the little makers are, it turns out, are actually the larval form of sandworms. And what sandworm little makers will do is they'll gather around water and effectively process it into spice. And so the spice is actually a way of effectively neutralizing water so that their adult versions will not encounter it and die, basically.
Okay.
Yeah. So the entire thing is effectively they have this huge, effectively it's a giant cartel of these noble houses vying for control of Arrakis, so then they can sell spice to not only the spacing organization, but also to effectively everyone else. Because the thing is if you start to consume spice, it'll make you much healthier. And it'll make you live for much longer. The problem is that you will start to get spice addiction, where you will be required to consume a certain amount of spice in order to live. And if you don't, then you go into withdrawal and you die, it's not good. Okay. Also, while there's also this happening, there is this weird secular organization called the Bene Gesserit. The Bene Gesserit is an entirely female organization whose entire thing is that they're shrouded in mystery, but everyone knows about them and wants to be on their good side because they are incredibly dangerous, incredibly well-informed, and they also are considered effectively witches. They have these strange techniques called the prana bindu and also the voice, whereupon they can just tell people to do things, and they are compelled, like on an instinctual level, to do it. It's also kind of a thing that's not really well known, but it's within their organization that they're actually trying to breed effectively as the Nietzsche's Superman, who would be able to like have prescience and be able to see all paths laid out before him.
Right.
Yeah, which is entirely their thing. They're supposed to they are trying to breed a Superman. And so they have all these things where they'll literally be like trying to get wives and consorts in the various houses in order to, further along not only their goals, but also to effectively guide the empire into a particular way. They're not really well liked, but everyone respects them,
right?
Because they are actually really, really dangerous. I mean, I could go into more like the fact that like because of the fact that shield technology is a thing, or like energy shields, and so ranged weapons have basically gone entirely out of favor, especially lasers, because as I said before, interactions of lasers and shields, that's not a good thing. Causes huge explosions. That basically ends badly for both the laser and the recipient of said laser.
Yeah, sounds like it.
Not good. So, I mean, it's actually really a really, really well thought out series. And it kind of ruined my expectations on what science fiction should be like, because like the original Dune book actually had this very long appendix of like, oh, this is what all these terms mean. And so when I was in high school, and actually when I showed you my first couple stories I wrote, that's what I was kind of going with. And that's why I would have these really long, dense, dictionaries of terms and stuff. That's why, as opposed to, trying to explain in the story itself. It's like, okay, this is what this means, or, trying to like establish through context. Most things in Dune, you can kind of parse what they are through context in the way that, people talk about them. But at the same time, I feel like, this is not the best way that the world could have been established. But,
I find that aside fascinating just because of the subject matter of today. Because if you love things that are dense and make no sense and have had more than one set of hands in the kitchen, oh boy.
I'm not going to go into the Brian Herbert books. Basically, the OG author, Frank Herbert, did 6. If you like the series, if you like the movies, read only the 6. The ones after that are not good. They are not good. And they are, I could go into, effectively, Arranger and I have commiserated over why the Brian Herbert books are bad. But I'm not going to, I've rambled long enough about it. So yeah, Dune, it's a thing that I really like. It's a book series that is really good. And apparently there's a lot of love for it now because of the movies. I'm not a big fan of the movies, but I am hoping that the MMO is good. And yeah.
No, that's fair. That's fair. No, I'll play it too. Like we'll get to see it from the perspective of a newcomer and someone who's already old hat. And
cool.
So let's get into today's topic, which I'm going to do I guess Snek Presents episode today, because we're going to get into the muddy water that is Five Nights at Freddy's. Now, I want to stress a few things about what it is we're going to be getting into, because Five Nights at Freddy's is a multimedia empire now. We're not going to get too into the weeds. I don't have infinity hours, and I don't have the sanity to just peruse every single thing. So here's how it's going to be. I will instead recount my personal experience chronologically with our understanding of the series and how it's developed from the beginning. This will reduce the numbers of times that I need to skip around, because if I try to do the lore chronologically, we start with Sister Location, which is the 6th game, essentially. And I'm not about that life. Also, the books essentially are not canon. I'll get into them a tiny bit at one point because there is like a really interesting detail from the first set of books. I have not read the Fazbear's Fright series yet, so I don't know what all's in them, so I'm not getting into that. And the movie is its own continuity. I did a review of it. It's good. Watch it. You'll probably enjoy it if you're a fan of the series. We're going to stick with the games, and we're going to stick mostly with the mainline games, and only that, barring one or two special exceptions. So, for simplicity...
can I...
By all means.
I was just going to say, what my experience with the game series is.
Oh, yes, please do.
Okay, so I saw you play some of them.
Right.
I saw you play a FNAF World, I want to say.
Yeah, the RPG.
I saw some of the books. I thought that Silver-Eyed Killer was a neat name for a title.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it. That is literally it. I have never played any of the games. I saw somebody, the honest trailer for like the first one, and I went, that doesn't look like something I'd like. No, actually, no, it wasn't them. It was Super Great Friend. did a review of like the very first game.
Oh, that's right.
And I'm like, that doesn't look like something I'd like. So I just never really got into it.
No, I mean, that's fair. That's fair because actually, you just raised a really important point, and I feel that context is really crucial here. So let me begin the story before Five Nights at Freddy's. Let me lay out the scene for what internet horror largely looked like ballpark between the years of 2008 to 2012-ish. That was the high time of YouTube horror of Slender Man series. And like everyone was either mimicking Marble Hornets or trying to do their own Slender series but add their own little spice to the recipe. And some of those were successful. I would say like Tribe 12 is a really good example of that done really well. Then you have ones that had up and downs like Everyman Hybrid, which I think started really strong and ended really weakly. Marble Hornets, I never liked Marble Hornets. I actually thought it was kind of bad and really improperly paced. That's going to lose me a few subs right there.
Like, Professor, what about Kids Crossing?
Okay, that was more of the analog horror boom, which I don't know if that was after FNAF or if I only got into it after FNAF, but analog horror has kind of always been its own little subgenre, and that's kind of slightly different. There's some crossover. There's definitely some cross-contamination there. Some kind of similar DNA. But it's the conventions of analog horror really solidified a little bit later. Though chronologically, they're probably all related.
It's just like, that was supposed to be like a shout out to our bro, Vintage 8.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. Fantastic gentleman. I love working with him. This stuff's is so awesome. I did a full video 2 years ago for Halloween that went up quite a ways into his channel. If you guys want a jumping on point, a little self promotion there. So yeah, we're looking at a landscape largely dominated by Slender Man, and the indie horror game scene was very much what I call chasers. You're in a forest or an abandoned building, and something big and spooky is chasing you. You run away from it, or you collect a certain number of items, or you find the key to the door so you can escape. And largely, that's just kind of what most indie horror games looked like at the time. I'm not saying this was good or bad. I'm just saying, broadly speaking, those were the trends. And
Spooky's House of Jump Scares is from that period, wasn't it?
I forget when Spooky's first came out, but it's been built.
But I mean, that's basically the way that things were,
right?
Yeah.
And honestly, I think Spooky refined that idea really, really well and added enough interesting wrinkles so that the gameplay stayed consistently fresh throughout. It's a good example of what the times had to offer. And along comes an indie bedroom game dev known as Scott Cawthon, and his story is fascinating. I'm not going to get too into the weeds here because that's not really the focus. But basically, he did a cutesy, family-friendly game called Chipper and Sons Lumber Company. And it was a cute, I think, educational mobile game about a family of beavers trying to run a lumber mill. It was all very cute and wholesome. And there was some scathing reviews of the games, and some reviews had something along the lines of, oh, they looked like scary animatronic animals you'd find at Chuck E. Cheese. And Scott's basic response to that was, oh, you want scary animatronic animals, huh? Okay, we can do that. He launched a Kickstarter for Five Nights at Freddy's and made exactly $0. Literally nothing. No one pledged anything. No one really knew what to make of it. It didn't get a whole lot of traction. Not many people saw the Kickstarter page. Most people learned about it after the fact. But Scott was not deterred. He sat down, he made a game, and basically did everything himself by hand and had his sons help playtest the game. This gave us, on August 8th, 2014, Five Nights at Freddy's. And here's the thing. Here's a personal story I'll share, and you guys can get a kick out of this. When I was a little kid, around where I was growing up at the time, there was a local grocery store chain that had just opened. I don't know if it was a chain. It might have been a standalone store. That's not important. They had just opened, and my mom took me. And I mind you, I was a very tiny snack at the time. I was like 2, 3, And they had a costume mascot character dressed up as one of the Ninja Turtles. And apparently, Little Snek was terrified. Like, I've always loved the Turtles. I talked about it enough on this podcast that everyone should basically know that. But apparently, I would not go near this suit actor because it just freaked me out. And apparently, I was just getting prepared for what was to come. Because Five Nights at Freddy's relied extensively on the unknown and the uncanny valley. Because the animatronics in this game were just that. They were large, mechanical. They were robots, essentially. Robots with the cute, colorful cartoon mascot costumes on. And so...
It just happened to be Iron Maiden.
Say again?
Well, no, I was about to say they just happened to be walking Iron Maidens, effectively.
Yeah, basically. So we had introduced the first animatronics. And here's the thing that a lot of people take for granted. We didn't even know they had names except for Freddy. Because in the game, that's the only name you're ever handed. You're told about Freddy, and you're told about the other characters, and the one in Pirate's Cove. So we didn't have names for these guys. So
really?
Yeah.
You didn't even know about Foxy? Because
Nope.
I distinctly remember when Super Great Friend did his thing, he was like, we got to watch Foxy. We got to watch Foxy.
Now,
because his entire thing was he wanted to actually get the viewer jump scared by getting killed by Foxy.
yes. Now, here's the thing.
That's surprising to me.
The names are in the game, but you have to beat the game to find out about them.
Huh.
You did not see them until you unlocked Night 6, known as Custom Night. You had to beat the main game, which is indeed the Five Nights at Freddy's, where there's basically a general ramp up in how the animatronics behave. I'm going to go a little bit into technicals, but only for like the first 2 games to kind of explain how this works, because honestly, I think it's fascinating, and you, Dietaku, might actually find this a really interesting way of doing things. Every animatronic has a D20 dice roll, effectively. And the entire idea is whatever the animatronic's AI level is the number to shoot under. So if they have if they had an AI level of 10 and they roll a 12, the animatronic fails their opportunity to move and they have to stay where they are. If they roll under 10, they would then succeed at their check, and the next time they have the opportunity to move, the animatronic succeeds in taking a step. Now, each animatronic had their own path. The way the game was designed was actually rather deviously brilliant, because for the first few nights, Freddy himself didn't do anything. He just sat there. You had to worry about Bonnie and Chica instead. Bonnie would go down the left-hand column of the restaurant, and Chica would come down the right, and they'd each have little quirks in how they behaved. Bonnie, for instance, was really erratic. He could essentially teleport anywhere on his path, just at any time. It became kind of a meme. It's like, oh yeah, Bonnie's just teleporting. He's in the closet. He's in the showroom. He's in the closet. He's in the hallway. He's in the closet. Just, he's just wherever he wants to be. Bonnie doesn't care. Chica's a little more linear, and Chica also typically had lower AI settings than Bonnie, so she was the one who was more likely to just kind of sit there and hotbox you the entire time. So people got a lot of conflicting, what anecdotal evidence does, especially when statistics are involved. There were a lot of rumors and misconceptions about how the game actually worked, though now we have a pretty robust understanding of how it all operates. The one thing that I think is hysterical is originally there were only the 3 characters. There was Freddy, there was Bonnie, and there was Chica, because the game revolved around power management. So Freddy really only became a threat if he ran out of power or on the latest nights of the week when he was the most active. So what happened was Scott wanted the player to move between using the cameras and using the doors in order to manage the threats. But his sons, who were his beta testers, discovered that if the threats were only Bonnie, Chica, and Freddy, they didn't need the cameras at all. You could literally repel them completely flawlessly, only using the doors and lights. So Scott, being a troll, went, yeah, okay, I can play that game. And he created Foxy as a counterbalance to this strategy. And he tells the story on one of the Reddit AMAs. And he was like, I was on a family vacation working on my laptop, and while his wife was driving, and he's like, I jump scared myself while coding Foxy. And I'm like, that's brilliant. I love it. And so Foxy's behavior was to incentivize camera usage. When the cameras were active, Foxy couldn't advance his movement opportunities. He automatically fails any movement opportunity that comes up while the cameras are active, even if you're not looking at him. So this created a really frenetic experience. Fundamentally, the first couple of FNAF games are puzzle games. And your reward for executing the puzzle correctly is progressing to the night, and your punishment is getting hit by a big old, 7-foot-tall mechanical monstrosity. And that's where the brilliance of this formula comes into play, is because it was beauty and simplicity. They had one core mechanic for the cameras, one core mechanic for the doors, and one for the lights. That was your puzzle. You figured out the rest as you went. But scattered in the background, people started noticing little details that changed throughout the week, because every level is ostensibly a different day of the week. So people started seeing like newspaper clippings saying, oh, the pizzeria is about to shut down, and 5 children went missing in the Freddy Fazbear's pizzeria. And the phone guy at the very first night of the game drops the legendary bite of 87. And all he bothers telling you is it's amazing that the human body can live without the frontal lobe. That's it. That's all we know. To this day, we still don't know who was bitten. We don't know who did the biting. I mean, the ultimate fate of the victim is pretty much spelled out. You would eventually die in that condition. But they didn't immediately, which is even more horrifying when you stop to think about it.
Actually, Snek, I mean, there's a thing about the fact that you should look up Phineas Gage, who effectively did have that situation happen.
Oh, geez.
Where he had his frontal lobe removed. He was a railroad worker that actually got a railroad spike effectively stabbed right through his head in such a way that it basically removed most of his frontal cortex.
Oof.
Or, frontal lobe.
Right.
Effectively, he went from being a very, very downspoken, God-fearing man to being rude, crude, a lout, a lecher, and he effectively died 8 years later by drinking himself to death. So technically speaking, you could live without your frontal cortex. The problem being is that that's where your decision-making and your quote-unquote common sense comes from.
Yep.
So it's not a good life, but you could live like that.
You could survive, yes. And that's the thing. That's literally all we know. To this day, that is the full extent of information about that bite that we ever got. Now, put a pin in that. We're going to come back to it in a few games because something really kind of amazing / goofy happened because of it. So really, all the lore that we get in the first game is kids died under mysterious circumstances. The animatronics smell like blood and mucus. And whoever designed these things was decades, possibly centuries ahead of their time. Because at the end of the game, your reward is a paycheck because you survived your week at work. And someone did some math and figured out that the paycheck actually lined up to a rate of minimum wage in the early 90s. And Scott was like, yes, exactly. You've actually figured out why the paycheck is as low as it is. And people were like, oh, so it's set in the early 90s. And that's when this all went down. And that's literally how we had to figure this stuff out. Scott would, if we had the answer right, Scott would confirm. But if we asked him for a straight answer, he usually just trolled us. So everyone, the entire fandom lit up. and started poring over every frame of the game, every bit of the game's code, everything, including the custom night challenge. Now, I think the first game's custom night challenge is the most interesting because Scott didn't think it was doable. He added it to the game just to see if other people might want to try it. But they did. They beat it. It's very RNG reliant, and you basically just have to have good luck for it to work, but it is doable. The thing is, at that level of aggression, Freddy is basically bull rushing your door, and when Freddy's at your door, he camps there the rest of the night, and you can never get rid of him again. So the entire strategy just revolves around basically monitoring him and Foxy and then just using the doors to repel Chica and Bonnie all night. It got very frenetic, and it really became a contest to see who could be the one to solve the puzzle. And eventually it was solved, and it's a good thing because it wasn't too long later. It was November of the same year we got Five Nights at Freddy's 2. Now, Five Nights at Freddy's 2, I have strong mixed feelings on because I love it, and at the same time, it drives me freaking crazy. See, FNAF 2 introduces a lot of new mechanics. The first being the puppet, which is a maintenance thing you have to do throughout the night where you have to wind up its music box via the camera. So the camera becomes even more important now. The trade-off is there's no more power. Well, your flashlight has power, but the building does not. And you can check the camera or use the lights in the building as much as you want. The trade-off is you don't have any doors. You have a Freddy Fazbear mask that works on some of the enemies, a flashlight that works on one of them, and a music box to keep the other placated. FNAF 2 has a lot of randomness because there are 10 threats on your life. Because this game introduced the toy animatronics. Toy Freddy, not Toy Foxy, that's the Mangle. Toy Freddy, Toy Bonnie, Toy Chica, the Mangle. And the Mangle is kind of what it sounds like, a animatronic born of neglect. That was supposed to, it was supposed to be Toy Foxy, essentially. But the kids are really, really mean sometimes. So the staff was like, oh, well, forget it. It's a take apart, put together attraction, and they can, figure out how robot parts work. And they abused this animatronic to the point where it became like a weird, dust bunny tumbleweed animatronic of its former self that they just nicknamed the Mangle because no one could be bothered to put it back together again. And this is where asking Scott for straight answers backfired, because the Mangle ended up causing a little bit of confusion. In the phone guy dialogue in the game, the Mangle is referred to as a he. But the Mangle is also active on the special custom challenge night known as Ladies' Night. Now, Scott admitted that the Mangle was added to Ladies' Night specifically to help balance the way those animatronics would behave, because Chica and Toy Chica are very easy to repel, even at high AI levels. So they asked, Scott, is Mangle a boy or a girl? And he responded, yes. So to this day, Mangle's known gender is listed as yes. And this is why we don't ask Scott for straight answers anymore. Because it's not worth it. Now, the thing about FNAF 2 that also changed up status quo is there was actual merit in losing a night. The reason being is if you lost a night and got jump scared, there was a non-zero chance that you would encounter a small 8-bit style minigame. And these minigames really, really extended our understanding of what happened at Freddy Fazbear's. Specifically, that the kids who went missing, it wasn't an accident. It was very much done on purpose, and thus we were introduced to a purple man. And the whole... I could go into hours and hours and hours of completely pointless fan debate about this. to give you some idea of how uptight the investigations became, is people began to speculate that there were two different purple guys because Scott used different shades of purple on them. Like, that's how nitpicky they had become, because they wanted to pour over every single detail. Now, the things that we did learn were significant, not the least of which was a little bit of meta-knowledge, because apparently the puppet was supposed to have been in FNAF 1 and wasn't. But we also learned that the puppet was hugely, hugely essential to the lore. The puppet is shown being the ones to put the masks of the characters on the fallen children, which gives us an indication that the puppet was probably some kind of caretaker figure, and it had a much more important role than anyone could have given it credit for. I say it. To clarify, I will explain why later, but the puppet is a she, and thus to be, to not insult her, I guess I should call it a her. We're getting into it. The intrigue was through the roof. The only thing with FNAF 2 and the frustration is that there was also a series of enemies known as the withered animatronics, that being the animatronic characters from the first game. And they're a pain. You have to be lightning fast to account for their threats once they become active. It was actually discovered that there is a way to glitch the camera to make the game think that you're always looking at the parts and maintenance camera, which locks the withered animatronics out of the game. And honestly, it makes it a way better game if you use the glitch. Because the withered animatronics are not fun or interesting. You just have to have flawless, lightning fast reaction speed every single time you put your camera down. Not fun. I did not enjoy that. In fact, the VR remake of FNAF 2 removed the withered animatronics completely, and I think it's a better game for it. So then we learn the important parts about FNAF 2. It's a prequel, because the paycheck you get at the end of the game is dated 1987. Now, here's the thing. Does that have anything to do with the bite of 87? Maybe not necessarily. The phone guy tells you that he's moving from day shift to night shift, and you're going from the night shift to the day shift for one last birthday party before the place closes down for renovation. It could be that the bite happened during that time, and it's also just as possible that it didn't. So it might have been a security guard, it might have been a guest, it might have been a child, it might have been an adult, it might have been a maintenance worker. We don't know. Now, the fact that it happens in 87 seems to wink and nudge in that general direction, that maybe there's a connection. We can't prove it, though. And again, we don't really know anything about the bite of 87 yet. So that could be maybe, maybe not. Now, we do learn that there's been multiple locations. The phone guy even talks about a sister location on the phone calls in Five Nights at Freddy's 2, meaning that there's been multiple franchise operations for at least a while. And we'll get more into that later, because we also learn later on that Freddy's has been around for several years and is pretty well known, at least in the United States. So, yeah, it was kind of a lot. We have a murderer. We have, dead kids. Intrigue was at an all-time high. So, of course, people were clamoring for more, especially as FNAF 2 got really good reviews upon release. This led us to, 4 months later, on March 2nd, 2015, we got FNAF 3. And FNAF 3 was quite the bombshell. Right out of the gate, Scott told us, this is going to be the end. This is it. I'm going to wrap this up. This is going to be a trilogy. It's set 30 years in the future, from which game doesn't really matter because they're close enough that it doesn't. And we're going to talk about the murderer. In one of the teaser images, we saw a specific name, Springtrap. And we're like, what's that? What is a Springtrap? No one knew. The term hadn't shown up in the games prior, so all we could do was play the game. And I'll be honest, mechanically, FNAF 3 is one of my least favorite games in the franchise. It's a little slow-paced. There's only one threat that can kill you. The phantom jump scares are just kind of annoying. I didn't like the maintenance panel gimmick. Like, I get what they were going for, because the whole thing is like, in the future, the stories of all the tragedies at Freddy locations eventually came back to bite Fazbear Entertainment as a corporate entity. And so they made a horror attraction based on the old pizzerias and all the urban legends that surrounded them, which makes, perfect sense, given all, like, there's a lot of dead kids. We don't even know how many at this point. So they find a working animatronic. And unfortunately, the one they do find is a yellow rabbit. So then we learn that long time ago, the head engineer at Freddy Fazbear's Entertainment created these things called the spring lock suits. Now, the thing that was revolutionary about them was that instead of just being a robot that walks around on its own, which led, to the Bite of 87, according to the first game, or it could be a guy, a mascot, or an intern in a costume. A spring lock suit was both. So there was no downtime. If the entertainer needed to step out of the suit, they could undo the spring locks, extend the animatronic skeleton back into its full position, and let the robot take over. And if there's like a special event or the character needed to talk, they could wind the spring locks and put themselves in the costume. It's maddeningly ahead of its time, because that makes no sense. Just for anyone who's ever been curious, animatronic characters in the real world are a moving torso on top of a stationary table. They aren't physically capable of walking around. If they're walking around, it's a dude in a suit. Like, I don't know what these engineers were doing, but whatever it was, they were way too good at their job. And so there was 2 mascot characters at one of the older locations. One place that we would then learn was called Fredbear's Family Diner. And there was a yellow bear and a yellow rabbit, that being Fredbear, and who would later come to be known as Spring Bonnie. So they find the Spring Bonnie costume. It turns out it's so much more, because inside, we would then go on to learn, was the murderer himself. It turns out that he was an employee of Fazbear Entertainment, as many had theorized up to that point, and was the guy who made the suits in the first place. He was the one who invented the spring lock suits. He knew how they operated. He knew how to control them. He was shown in the 8-bit minigames found in FNAF 3 to basically use it as armor to manipulate the children. Now, this is kind of an important detail, and actually something I kind of skimmed over and I shouldn't have. So, in the first game, it is unclear if the animatronics are haunted or if they're robots that are encountering errors. And I actually think not knowing that made the situation scarier, because then you enter a realm of uncertainty. Now, FNAF 2 more or less spelled it out that, yes, the corpses of the children are inside the suits, and so are their souls. So you have ghost children piloting these characters around, and they're scared out of their minds. They don't know where they are. They've been away from their families for all these years, mentally still just like little kids, basically. And so, of course, they're lashing out at any adult they come near. That explains their behavior perfectly. Now, we then learn that the killer, using the Spring Bonnie suit as basically armor, was able to move around among them undisturbed up until he upset them. Yeah, see, he tried to kind of cover up his crime by decommissioning the animatronics violently, and their literal ghosts show up in the pizzeria and start chasing him around. And he's just like, well, nuts to this. I'm going to put on the suit and I'll be safe. Well, he forgets one little detail, that spring locks are fascinating pieces of equipment, but they're also really weirdly fragile. And we learned that things like water, breathing, sweating, moving around, things that you would do in a costume can cause the spring locks to come loose. And they did. all at the same time. The murderer was then basically sealed in an Iron Maiden of his own design of his favorite character and locked there for, at minimum, 30 years. Plot-wise, FNAF 3 is probably one of the most significant moments of the entire franchise. Now, the thing that marred it a bit was the game wasn't particularly well reviewed. A lot of people kind of shared my sentiments. It didn't have much of an impact. It was mechanically passable, but I wouldn't go so far as to say competent. And even though if you do the best ending, which by the way is nearly impossible to do, because each night has a minigame tied to it, and you have to do some kind of stupid things in order to figure it out. At one point, and the one that I could not figure out without a guide, is you get a hint about a number pad. But here's the thing, there's no number pad anywhere in your office. What you end up doing is pushing on the wall tiles as they correspond to a number pad. How you were supposed to figure this out without dissecting the game files, I have no earthly idea. I think Scott got really, really, really carried away with the hunting for any possibility options found in the first early games. But that's the thing. I didn't have to do something that obtuse in FNAF 2 to find the lore. I just had a chance of running into it when I died or when I was scanning over the cameras. So I think FNAF 3 was a bit of a misstep, and thankfully Scott agreed because the franchise did not end in a trilogy. In fact, we continued right into Five Nights at Freddy's 4 in July of that year. Oh boy, FNAF 4 was also billed as the final game in the franchise, which led to a lot of people joking that another popular Freddy in the horror genre once promised his fourth installment was going to be his last, and that also ended up not being true. Hoo boy. Okay, so Five Nights at Freddy's 4, before it released, had a long series of teaser images on scottgames.com. Now, mind you, so did 2 and 3. A lot of people started really tuning in, especially once the teasers for 2 started coming up, but 4, Scott went all in on. And the whole thing was, every one of these teasers contained the number 87. It became the ARC number for the advertising of the games. This caused a bit of a kerfuffle in one of the funniest / most ironic ways possible. Scott went into the source code of scottgames.com and peppered it with 8s and 7s just to drive home how big a deal this was going to be. Fans are zealous by nature. FNAF fans chief among most. This is a true story because truth is stranger than fiction. While they were trying to put these 8s and 7s into various ciphers and codes and trying to interpret them as anything other than the 8s and 7s that we were visibly seeing, which worked, by the way. And guess what it gave us? The coordinates to a real-life American pizzeria.
Wow.
Scott did not mean to do this, by the way. This was an accident. So this random pizzeria, I don't remember which one it is. I'll need to look that up, and I'll pin a comment down below. Like, people started calling, thinking the pizzeria was doing a cross-promotion with Five Nights at Freddy's 4. And apparently, the dude had no idea what they were talking about. And he kept getting these calls. Like, lots and lots and lots of people were calling, fully convinced that Scott had done this. It took a few days for him to realize what was happening and to make a post like, hey, guys, no, seriously, like, don't, please stop. The pizzeria owner decided to make lemonade out of lemons. And if people called in asking about the Freddy Fazbear special, you got an extra topping for free.
Wow.
So FNAF started bleeding over into the real world, if inadvertently, and Scott very quickly took the 8s and 7s out of the page source code and begged people like, stop, this has nothing to do with the game. The fact that it's a pizza place is just a coincidence. I didn't mean for this to happen. So, bit of a weird start for sure. And being there on the front lines as this was happening was a different kind of experience, let me tell you. So, FNAF 4 dropped.
I get it.
Oh, yeah. No, definitely. Okay, so in July, FNAF 4 drops. It is up and away the most intense. Scott went for terrifying, monstrous designs. He made the nightmare animatronics, and they were big, and they were intimidating. They had claws and teeth and destroyed bodies that exposed like these terrifying demonic endoskeletons within them. And people were like, holy crap, this is insane. Like, what is this? And lore-wise, FNAF 4, it's not terribly significant. At least not yet. So what we learn is that we are playing as a small child who is on their last legs, medically speaking. They are seeing these like demonic incarnations of characters he once loved coming after him, and all he knows is fear. And as you're looking around the room, there's some random chance of the room slightly changing, including seeing things like flowers next to the bed or an IV drip stand, all indicating that his fate is already sealed. So then, each night you complete, you get a little bit of a cutscene, and you see that we are playing as the younger brother in a household of at least 2 siblings, presumably more since there's enough rooms in the house where they easily could be more. And the big brother loves tormenting the crap out of his little brother, like a lot. Probably more than is healthy for a regular sibling rivalry. And the younger brother has a birthday coming up at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. And then we see the older brother and his friends start, tormenting the little kid, and the kid's terrified of these animatronic characters. And they're like, oh, why, if you love Fredbear so much, why don't we give you a closer look at him? Just in time for the mechanical jaws to trap shut and kill the younger brother. This, for a time, was believed to be the bite of 87. But it wasn't. Did I remember asking Scott for straight answers doesn't get you what you want? This was a completely different event. And this was the bite of 83. Now, there are some details that corroborate this. Both Scott has said as much, and even within the games, we're told that the bite of 87 happened because the animatronic characters used to be able to walk around. But the bite we see in 4, Fredbear is on stage. He's not moving at all, apart from his mouth. The kid was pushed towards the machine, not the other way around. So there have been 2 different bites that happened under 2 completely different sets of circumstances. Around this time, we kind of went into a bit of a quiet period. Scott said, there's going to be a Halloween update. There's going to be more to come. The Halloween update's not going to be like lore significant, but it'll have a new challenge mode and some new options. And we were shown at the end of FNAF 4, if you did the hardest challenge, which was basically a modified version of what's come to be known as the 420 mode from the original game, we were shown a black box with 2 locks on it. And Scott said, if you want the answers, you have to figure out how to unlock the box. Around this time, a lot of the diehard investigative energies in the fandom started sizzling out. People had kind of done this song and dance before. In fact, FNAF 4 was not reviewed exceptionally well. Not like FNAF 1 and 2 were. A lot of people had kind of been like, okay, we're kind of doing the same thing now. FNAF 4 is a lot like FNAF 1, but it's kind of cheaper in some ways. While the designs are really cool, a lot of people complained that when you move from door to door, the player looks down at the floor. So when you get jump scared, it's really cheap and there's nothing you can do about it. You rely on a quote unquote breathing sound, which doesn't sound like breathing, by the way, to determine if the animatronic's at the door. If they're at the door, you close it and you hold it for a few seconds and then they run away. If they're at the end of the hallway, you flash them with your flashlight. You screw this up, you get jump scared. And let me tell you, it's probably the most intense jump scares the first 4 games have. But again, it doesn't feel earned. If I got jump scared in FNAF 1, either the RNG was really against me or I screwed up. If I got jump scared in FNAF 4, a lot of the time it was just because I couldn't tell if I was hearing breathing or some kind of meaningless background negative noise. So Scott kind of left a few posts saying like, hey, there is going to be more games. I wasn't satisfied with like how people reacted to 4. And instead of a FNAF 5, we got FNAF World. Scott basically said point blank, he's like, guys, you can only make so many indie horror games about dead kids before you really need to take a breather. And I don't blame him, because again, 4 was really grim. 4 in particular was kind of like almost mean-spirited. And a lot of the fan discussion that followed it was kind of similar, because Scott started also dropping hints right before FNAF World that our interpretation of events up to this point might have been misled. He started saying things like, oh, why would Toy Chica's beak be missing in FNAF 2? And, why is that significant? And, what if? And he started giving all these hints. So people came up that, well, what if it's dream theory? What if literally FNAFs 1 through 4 have been the dreams of a child with a literal broken mind, and this is just his death spiral? And for a time, it seemed like that might have been or was going to be the canon answer. And honestly, that bummed a lot of people out. The morale of the good ship FNAF was low, and Scott himself seemed kind of burned out by the whole thing. So we get FNAF World. FNAF World, I did a full Let's Play on the channel. You guys can watch it. Master Dietaku and Clockwork were with me for it. It was good fun. FNAF World was silly, where he kind of went back to his roots, and Scott gave us this silly RPG that was fun and flashy and colorful. And it had like cutesy designs. Like even Springtrap and the Nightmare animatronics are kind of cute in FNAF World. It's one of those things that's really divisive, because from what I've seen, people either loved FNAF World and thought it was the breath of fresh air that the franchise needed, or they hated FNAF World and everything to do with it. I loved it. I thought FNAF World was exactly what the doctor ordered. Especially as an update came and made the game even better. So there's a special hidden ending in FNAF World, which I did not do. I did what's generally considered the main story of FNAF World in the Let's Play. There's a thing called the clock ending. And in the clock ending, you have to wait for Fredbear to stop talking, and he'll glitch out and give you a different storyline where you have to find the clocks in each of the game's hidden areas, each one corresponding to a hint to the solutions at the end of day puzzles in Five Nights at Freddy's 3. If there was ever a way to find out how you were supposed to do those puzzles, FNAF World was the way to do it. So, a little bit meta, but honestly, I liked it. I thought it was a good change in pace, a good breath of fresh air, and, it kind of tied some stuff together. Then things got complicated, because 2 things happened next. The very first FNAF novel dropped, and FNAF World gave us a teaser to Five Nights at Freddy's 5. This is where the water is going to go from relatively straightforward to clear as mud, because we're entering into the retcon era. The FNAF novel, The Silver Eyes, which is a pretty good read, and I'm not saying it's high art or anything, but I enjoyed it. The Silver Eyes told us one key bit of information that is canon for the games, and that is the name of our antagonist, William Afton. who was the business partner of one Henry Emily. These two went into business together, with Henry as the business side of Fazbear Entertainment and Afton as the engineer. Afton was the one that made the spring-lock suits, and Henry was the one who made the business decisions. And presumably also designed Freddy based on context. I don't know if that's actually been confirmed or not. Then we get Sister Location. That was October 2016. You might notice that's the biggest break in these games that we had so far. Scott was churning these games out like crazy. The first 4 games happened within months of each other. Even FNAF World dropped not too long after. There was a big delay, in part because FNAF 4 got the Halloween update, FNAF World got a Halloween update, and then he decided that it was time to change things. He hired voice actors. He hired music people. He hired other people to work on the games for the first time. Sister Location was a big undertaking and a bit of a mixed bag, both mechanically and lore-wise. And I'm going to do my best to try to break this down because retcons, oh boy. To begin with, we start the game, and the game kind of goes back to that dark comedy that we saw a lot of in FNAF 1 and 2 in particular, which I thought was really good. The series needed a little more humor peppered back into it because of how drab and severe FNAF 4 had become. So Sister Location explains that there was this really new, cutting-edge, highly precisely engineered location of Fazbear Entertainment Incorporated. This included animatronics that moved using a very sophisticated set of hydraulics. You actually get to see the blueprints for them, and it's crazy. I don't think it would work in real life, but it's fascinating from a theory crafting standpoint. But these animatronics would have very fluid abilities to move, but would also be freakishly strong because hydraulics can do that, which in this world is definitely not a good thing. So, in Sister Location, instead of going with each night being the same core mechanics with the enemy AI ramping up each night, Sister Location has different nights with different things happening in them. In one night, this was probably the biggest departure, apart from FNAF World, obviously. But of the mainline games, FNAF World is generally not considered a mainline game. Sister Location started shaking things up almost immediately. First off, the main character was not a Freddy. There is a Freddy. There's a Funtime Freddy. But the main character is Circus Baby. The first time we actually saw that name was the Halloween update in FNAF World. But if you didn't play FNAF World, she just comes out of nowhere. And we learned that she was very sophisticated. She had helium tanks in her forearms. She could blow up balloons with her fingertips. She had an ice cream dispenser in her torso. She was loaded for bear and was ready to be rented out to children's parties all across the United States. Up until something happened. Circus Baby, I'm not sure if this was an intended situation or not. But Afton, who designed Circus Baby, told his daughter to stay away from Circus Baby at all costs. She did not listen. And then one day, she was alone in the room with Circus Baby. And mind you, Circus Baby is sophisticated. She can talk, and she talks a lot. And she tells you, the player, that she had a habit where she would count people in a room. And if there was more than one other person in the room, she would just keep counting. But if there was only one person in the room, something changed. And we see this happen in the form of an 8-bit style minigame. If you complete a particular puzzle in the right order, you see Circus Baby's torso open up as massive mechanical vice grips lunged out and ensnared Afton's daughter within. This was not the plan, near as I can tell. Whether Afton had this happen as an accident or was intending it for someone else is largely unclear, near as I know. But the end result was, well, suddenly Circus Baby had a little bit more human-like personality. And human-like personality characteristics, including things like the ability to lie, to be petty, vindictive, and willing to do anything to get ahead. Because that's how Scrap Baby do. And she guides you through the nights at the sister location, through many, many, many frustrating puzzles. Honestly, mechanically, sister location is way harder than it has any right to be. There are a few puzzles that, to this day, I think I only managed to beat by luck. Like, there's one where very early on, you have to deal with Funtime Freddy. And the whole idea is you're trying to reroute the power using this control panel. But when you're using the control panel, you're not looking at Freddy. If you're not looking at Freddy, Freddy is free to move. When you look up, you can play an audio cue and send Freddy back to his starting position. But if you do that, whatever you're working on resets unless it's at 100%. So you have to balance completing that puzzle and then dealing with Freddy. This is insanely frustrating. I don't know if I'm doing something wrong or if this puzzle is just way more precise than I have it in me. I beat it eventually, but it was hard and it wasn't fun. Then later, there's a bit where, due to Funtime Foxy attacking you, you get stuck in a spring lock suit yourself. Now, mind you, you're not impaled by it, but you are wearing it. And these little terrifying spider ballerina things start climbing into the suit. And the instructions for how this puzzle works are not clearly explained to the player. Scott actually patched the game within about a week of it launching, specifically because people were stuck on the Springtrap Suit event. And even after being patched for being way too hostile, I still feel like it's way, way too hostile. So, Sister Location is not my favorite installment of this series. Now, what happened lore-wise next is hard to articulate because it goes completely off the rails. If you follow the normal ending, you get to a room where Circus Baby informs you that there is this thing called the scooping room. And the scoop is what it sounds like. It's a large mechanical arm. And the idea being that if the animatronics were to start getting buggy or start having issues, the scoop slams into them and tears the hydraulic system out of them. Thus, the suit can be reused. So the thing there is you're not an animatronic suit, but you're standing in the scooping room. And so you are the one who gets scooped. And it turns out that over the course of the game, the other animatronics, Funtime Freddy, Funtime Foxy, Circus Baby, and Ballora, had also gotten scooped, but instead of having their systems disposed of, they decided that the team that sticks together wins, and they become a amalgam animatronic known as Ennard. And Ennard decides that it's tired of hanging around in a metal and plastic container and decides that a flesh suit is much more to their liking. So they take you for a ride out of the restaurant. So you're a zombie. You're a zombie now. And then, if you clear the game's challenge mode, which involves going off the beaten path and to a FNAF 1 style minigame, where you use cameras and doors in order to quell animatronics, you will then see a series of short cutscenes, where at first the main character seems okay and he's going about his day and he waves at his neighbors and is doing just fine, and a couple of days later he's not looking so good. He's rotting from the inside out, and looking a little purpley along the way. And then, the ending. Okay, so the final secret ending in Sister Location is a monologue. And we hear this monologue from a fella who informs us that the animatronics knew who he was, not because they were after him, but because he looked so much like his father. We then had it confirmed that this fella was the Mike Schmidt who was on the first paycheck of the first game. We also learn that he was the abusive big brother in Five Nights at Freddy's 4. We also learn that he was the same security guards of FNAF 1 and 2 trying to sneak back into Fazbear Entertainment in order to free the spirits of the children put there by his father. This is all retcons, by the way. This was not the original story trajectory. And even explaining this, I'm feeling a little bit like this is a fever dream. So then, the game ends with one last cutscene of Mike basically keeling over, looking like he's about to die, and Innard escapes from his body into the sewers. And Mike gets back up again. Because now I have to explain a little something that only the novels and one of the spin-off games touch upon. Around this time-ish, I forget the exact timeline here, there was a mobile game, FNAF AR Special Delivery. FNAF AR Special Delivery is important for a couple different reasons and some really frustrating ones. The idea was simple. The game was not terribly complex, where you would have animatronics come into your house and you use your cell phone camera and hit them with a taser to deactivate them. And if you defeated animatronics enough in a row, you could find rarer animatronics, and you would like custom build your own to send after your friends and harass them. It was okay. The server actually shut down very recently as of this recording. So you can't play it anymore. It was okay. Gameplay-wise, you're not missing too much, but it was entertaining. The things that became frustrating was that there was a lot of lore. Like, a lot of lore. And some of it never even got officially released. They were leaked by fans who were mining the game later. But one of the things that we learn is about this concept called Remnant. And Remnant also shows up extensively in the novels. I don't know if this has officially been introduced to the games or not. As far as I know, Remnant is only mentioned in the AR spinoff, and I'm fairly confident that the AR game was supposed to be canon. It's a mess. This is what happens when you stop having just one game dev. Anyway, Remnant is a type of metal that attracts soul stuff. Whatever souls are made of, it's highly attracted to this remnant, which charges it. And once charged, remnant can be used to animate things that have constituent pieces, clearly identifiable arms, legs, head, so on. And it seems that perhaps the first time that Afton discovered this was an accident. He probably didn't do it on purpose, or that's kind of the impression I take away. The subsequent multiple times where he did it again, not an accident. And it seems if the novels are canon, and in some ways they are, in some ways they aren't, it's a thing, he was looking for basically the cure to death. We know that the Afton family is one fraught with tragedy and loss over and over and over again. And it is entirely possible that he went to these extents specifically out of the grief of losing several children and a wife. Is that necessarily the actual answer? I don't know. I don't know if Scott's ruled in on this officially or not. At this point, things have been retconned so many times, it's really genuinely difficult to say. But it does seem like that's what all the clues that we have are currently hinting at. But the story's not over yet, because Scott decided that it was time to put a period on the end of the sentence, and did so by trolling us. because he said, hey, guys, the next game is not going to be a big deal. It's going to be a cutesy little 8-bit fun thing that has no real significance to anything, but I'm putting it out there just to, put a game out there, and that way you guys have something small to tide yourselves over with. He created Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator. He reverse trolled us, because Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator was not some cutesy little 8-bit experience to spend 5-10 minutes on. It was FNAF 6. It was, honest to God, probably the most important story piece that we've gotten of the puzzle so far. Because you're put in the role of a Freddy Fazbear Entertainment franchisee. And during the daylight hours, you get to customize your own restaurant. And you get to put your own animatronics in. This is where Mr. Hippo comes from, by the way. And Mr. Hippo is the best animatronic. I don't care what anyone says. I love that character so much. Anyway, you fire up the game, you start your restaurant, and at night, you have to do some maintenance tasks while being threatened by anything that has managed to find its way into your pizzeria. And each night, you also find mysterious salvage in the back alley of your pizzeria. And you have the option of throwing it away and not getting the best ending, or salvaging it at your own risk to get money and to indeed get the best ending. Some of these guys are going to look kind of familiar, like a scrapped version of Circus Baby with a chainsaw for an arm. That's definitely kosher. You definitely want that in your kid-friendly family installment. You definitely want that. Another one you find is a particularly bad state Springtrap, and a strange black Freddy named Lefty. Golly, it sure does look weird, almost like there's something inside of him. I'm sure that's nothing. Anyway, there are 6 endings to Pizzeria Simulator, 5 of which are not canon. Only the best ending is canon, so that's the only one I'm going to focus on because this is a lot, and there's still more to come. So, at the best ending, you salvage all of the animatronic characters. You have done your best to run your restaurant competently, not go into bankruptcy, and not be destroyed by lawsuits of angry and rightfully so parents. At the very end, you realize that Fazbear's Pizza is no longer a corporate entity. It has been gone for years. And this quote-unquote help wanted ad was really a farce, set up by Henry Emily to bring together all of his mistakes in one place at one time so that they could finally be destroyed. The building is set on fire with our main character, presumably Mike, in the center of it all, with his father, his sister, and several other victims trapped in ancient coffins that were supposed to represent something fun and happy. And Henry gives a speech that still makes my blood run cold about how, after this, for most of you, there will be peace. But for one of you, the deepest depths of hell have opened to swallow you whole. So don't keep the devil waiting, old friend. So, everything is destroyed. It is rendered to ashes. It is over. Or so you would think. Because that was the end of the Scott Cawthon era of FNAF. At this point, Scott became a lot more hands-off, because he then passed the rights to Steel Wool Publishing, which then took over with Five Nights at Freddy's Help Wanted. Help Wanted is not really one cohesive game. It's made up of remakes of the original games from 1 till I think 4? No, 1 to Sister Location. And basically you play like a full 3D, fully realized, fully rendered retelling of those games. And the narrator very glibly tells you that a rogue indie developer decided to besmirch the good Fazbear name by making a series of unflattering indie horror titles loosely based on their properties, but without having actual license to the rights. It's all very cute. If you just play the game normally, there isn't any lore at all, but that's not how you play a FNAF game. So, there are a set of 10 VHS tapes you find hidden throughout the mini-games and all the different events, all kind of just hidden around the game world. You have to move some stuff around to find most of them. So, you get these tapes from one of the game testers, a young lady who tells you about weird goings-on during the game's development. And you learn that one of the ways they were able to so accurately recreate these events was because there was scrap pieces of old animatronic hardware, and they actually copied them into the game in order to make them as realistic as possible. This goes over like a lead balloon, as you might imagine, because something gets into the games as a result. A strange yellow rabbit character. Very strange yellow rabbit character who came to be known as Glitch Trap. Now, Glitch Trap, the fans, when they first saw him, of course assumed, oh my god, William Afton has somehow climbed out of hell and has become this weird glitch. The fandom was really, really, really split on like how to feel about this. But we'll get to that in a minute, because whether that was the original intention or not, that's not how it stayed. Also, I was incorrect. I just looked it up on the wiki. AR Special Delivery was 2019, so that was actually a little later than I thought it was. But that's not important. The next major game was Security Breach. Security Breach came out December 2021. And unfortunately for Security Breach, they ran out of money and they ran out of time. They had to push something out the door, so they did. The game that came out looked very nice. It was a buggy, janky mess, and people learned how to speedrun the game by having Gregory jump on the curtains and over a wall. That's about how well put together this game was. Now, they did fix it. There were numerous patches later on that put the game into a much better state, but the game's general throughline still wasn't that great. The entire story is Fazbear, as a franchise, was back on its feet somehow and made this great big mall, the Pizza Megaplex. I'm sorry, the Mega Pizzaplex. Let's get it right. The Mega Pizzaplex. And the whole thing is there was whole new animatronic characters with tons and tons of safety features to make sure nothing could possibly go wrong this time, and the new Glam Rock animatronic characters. That would be Glam Rock Freddy, Glam Rock Chica, and 2 new additions of Montgomery Gator and Roxanne Wolf. I do not recommend you Google Roxanne Wolf's name with safe search off. That's all I'm saying on the subject matter.
I cannot imagine what you mean by that, Professor.
I know, right? It's so enigmatic. So, in the Mega Pizzaplex, this little boy without his new family named Gregory gets into the building. And Gregory is a big fan of Freddy. And he ends up going and seeing him after one of the shows. And Freddy is like, oh, well, it's dangerous for customers to be in here unattended. It's after hours. This isn't safe. So what I'll do is I have this hatch in my chest that I usually carry like cakes and presents and stuff for kids who have birthdays here at the mall. You can hide in there, and I'll just carry you to the front door, and you can go out, and you'll be safe. This does not work. For numerous reasons, the mall is locked down with very advanced security protocols, and they would have to find an alternative exit. Not the least of which is the fact that Freddy's friends have now gone berserk and are trying to hunt down Gregory, in addition to the human security guard named Vanessa. So, as the game goes on, the TLDR of it is you learn that something is manipulating the animatronics and tried to manipulate Freddy too. He failed due to a networking issue, but he got everyone else. So Freddy is desperately trying to keep this kid alive, balancing the fact that as an animatronic character, he has to stop and recharge his battery every so often, putting Gregory on his own for certain legs of the game. Gregory's origins are very unclear, but certain endings indicate that he is an orphan and possibly someone of great interest to someone within Fazbear Entertainment. Now, that's a little unclear, and part of it's because the game suffered massive last-minute cuts. As said, game was basically not finished when it released, which really soured people's views on it. And I think the base game is still just, okay. But to be honest, I'd play Security Breach before I played Sister Location again, so maybe that's just me. What made it way more interesting was the fact that the game had many endings. And the thing is, we didn't know which one was canon until now. They released the DLC called Ruin. And Ruin helped us figure out what was the canon ending. And it's not the one you might expect. The reason I say that is because of those endings, one of them is fully CG rendered and actually animated front to end. And every other ending is done in a still comic book style format. Again, they ran out of money. They literally couldn't finish it. So everyone was like, oh, well, the CG ending has to be the canon one. And if that was the case, what ended up happening is that Glitchtrap escaped the virtual world, built himself a new body, and became, quote-unquote, Burn Trap, and was William Afton back in the real world again, inexplicably, and trying to hunt down Gregory for some vaguely defined purpose. It's never really said. Ruin fixes this, which is a really funny thing to have to say. Ruin tells us that no, that's not the canon ending. The canon ending is the one where Freddy gets torn apart and his head is separated from his body. Gregory takes the head, connects it to a car battery, and runs away with it after getting Vanessa out of Glitchtrap's control. Now, remember when I said AR was kind of important? Well, some of the leaked emails found in the game's code explain exactly what happened to Vanessa. What we learn is that Vanessa was one of the testers for Help Wanted, and Glitchtrap managed to manipulate her. The emails found in AR included things where he was threatening her friends and family, that if she disobeyed him, he would basically just tear her limb from limb. It got pretty graphic and gave pretty clear reasoning why Vanessa would not want to try this guy. So she was basically his thrall as the bunny costume-clad Vanny. In Ruin, Gregory sends out a distress signal to his friend Cassie. Cassie comes in, and she is trying to find Gregory with everything in the Mega Pizzaplex having fallen into, ruin. And first off, they fixed a lot of the wandering issues in Security Breach. They actually made it scary again. They actually gave it, genuine moments of good tension, much more interesting use of the game mechanics. It was honestly, Ruin was just fantastic. Ruin is what redeemed Security Breach. So, as you're going through, there's this security system that keeps trying to lock things down. You can't get to Gregory if things are locked down. So Cassie has to overrule it and find ways to defeat these feral versions of the animatronics. Montgomery Gator had his legs broken off, and so he's dragging himself with his forearms like a feral alligator trying to get at you. Or there's a bit where Chica's face is completely smashed in, and she's running through the kitchen, and she can barely see or hear you. It's all really visceral, really well done. Cassie gets down into the chasm below, and there finds that Gregory is not there. Gregory has never been there, and William Afton isn't there either. Because, again, Ruin introduces us to an entity known as the Mimic. The Mimic was Glitchtrap. The Mimic was an advanced AI system that learned how to do things by observing others and copying their behaviors, hence Mimic. But it just copied these things, but it also copied data from murderous animatronics that thought killing adults and children were okay. And this VR game where you did it again. So all this thing has ever seen is violence, hatred, and the endless cycle of revenge. So the Mimic was trying to get free of the security system put on it by Vanessa. And Cassie basically opened the door for it and let it out. So there is one bit of ambiguity because there's two endings in Ruin and we don't know which one's canon yet. In one ending, you just run for it. You get to the elevator and you leave the Mimic behind trying to get out of the Mega Pizzaplex. And Gregory's talking to you on your walkie-talkie, and he's like, hey, I was never there. That was the Mimic the whole time using my voice to lure you in. And then the radio crackles, almost like the signal's being cut off. And then Gregory, quote-unquote Gregory, says, oh, well, you know too much, you've gone too deep, and we can't allow it to escape. And the elevator drops. That's the standard ending you would get if you just finished the game. In the alternate ending, you have to unlock certain doors. It's a little convoluted. I'm not going to get into it. But if you follow a particular puzzle through the game, you unlock an alternate path during the last chase sequence, and you can lure the Mimic into a room that looks a lot like the scooping room from Sister Location. And the scoop smashes him, and it just stops. That's where the ending is. We don't know if either of these permanently put the Mimic out of commission, and we also don't know Cassie's fate right now. So whether she survives or whether she was dropped into the maw of the sinkhole underneath the Mega Pizzaplex is a complete question mark right now. There is no way to know until the sequel comes out. The only game that we've gotten since was Help Wanted 2. And Help Wanted 2 really only kind of shows us stuff behind the scenes. In both Help Wanted and Help Wanted 2, there's a series of mini-games that you can play called Princess Quest. And if you follow the story of Princess Quest, a weird, dark rabbit entity is manipulating this princess and trying to consume her. At the end of all of these Princess Quest minigames, eventually the princess destroys the evil rabbit character. And at the end of Help Wanted 2, we see Vanessa refuse to be a slave to Glitchtrap, and thus free of his control and able to live a regular life again. So that's where we are. That is, in a nutshell, the FNAF story as it was handed to us, as best as I can tell you, because I cannot do some of these alternate endings because some of these games are way harder than certain others. That's where it stands. The Mimic, I think, has great promise to be a new arc villain, and I hope and pray they don't try to find some convoluted method to bring Afton back. I think the final nail to that coffin has been established. He had a motivation. He did bad things. He got his comeuppance repeatedly. You know, let the dead stay buried and kind of start a new story with the Mimic. That is the direction I hope it goes. So,
no, we need to bring it back forever.
No.
Just like the Joker. Just like you got to bring the Joker back. Because who's Batman without the Joker? Oh my goodness. Okay, realistically though, sorry, I had to.
No. It's a fair point, and there are people out there making that argument. You're not wrong.
So I have to ask: did they ever actually explain Golden Freddy? I'm sorry, I had to step away there for a little bit because
no, you're good. I was monologuing.
Evil that is now sitting on my foot.
I have a snow leopard here too, but so I understand. So yes and no. And here's the thing: the original Springlock Freddy suit was Fredbear. In FNAF 1, the fans referred to it as Golden Freddy, and the internal files for the game just call it Yellow Bear. So we didn't know a whole lot then. FNAF 2 had Golden Freddy show up again, and in Custom Night, he's actually listed as G Freddy. But it wouldn't be for a few more games that we learned about the Springlock suits and how they operated. And apparently, Afton would put on the Spring Bonnie costume, and Henry would put on the Spring Freddy costume as, well, Fredbear at the time. He wasn't Freddy yet. And that golden suit was the Fredbear costume. And apparently one of the original 5 children that William murdered in the first pizzeria was indeed put in the Fredbear costume. Now, Afton kept the Spring Bonnie suit separate, but that was for his own machinations. So Golden Freddy was indeed possessed with the original series of animatronics and was released and purified in FNAF 3's Happiest Day ending. So yes, there was an explanation eventually, but it took a few installments and there really wasn't too much lore around it, despite the fact that it was kind of a big deal. Honestly, I think Scott put it in the game to have something that was out of the ordinary, because the way you beat Golden Freddy in the first 2 games was just ignoring him, putting your camera up, and then dropping it again, and he'd go away. Or as someone on YouTube once opined, you defeat him by your lack of object permanence.
I see. The only reason why I ask is because I distinctly remember in Super Great Friends and also in other media that I've seen that, they kind of hyped it up. As I said, I've never actually played any of the games. I mean, I am not, which is weird. I'm not really that much of a big horror person, but at the same time, in the kind of horror adjacent games that I do play, doesn't really bother me. In Bloodlines, in the one bit that everyone hates, I honestly didn't mind it so much. The haunted house. Yes, the haunted motel that you have to purify.
I rather like that bit, honestly.
If there's a bit of that game that I hate more, it's the sewers. And that's because, first off, I don't like the Nosferatu as a clan. I understand why they're a thing, and also the entire place is just crawling with Tzimisce war monsters. Yeah. And the problem being is that if this was in the Dark Ages and you were given better disciplines, I'd be like, all right, fine, whatever. But this is in the modern Knights. You don't get the cool disciplines. And they're like, oh, it just so happens that we're all really resistant to firearms. I'm like, if I go anywhere near you, you're just going to immediately just slap me silly with your 30 arms. This is really a lose-lose situation.
Yep.
And they actually show you a Nosferatu who tries to fight it in melee with celerity and he doesn't come out of it looking well. He gets killed. Yeah. So So I mean, So anyways, back to my point. I'm not really that big on horror games, but I always kind of been mildly interested. It's just kind of more just kind of in awe of Scott and his ability to just build this broad web across his games. I try to do that myself with my shared universe that I have. Yeah, but I think, it's more.
Well, I mean, part of it is the fact that the games are short. You could beat FNAF 1 in a short afternoon. And if you're really familiar with the game mechanics, that includes challenging yourself on things like the 420 mode. The FNAF 1's really short. FNAF 2's not too much longer. I think the one that would take most people the most time on their first attempt would probably be either FNAF 4 or Sister Location. My personal favorite, just from I enjoyed the gameplay standpoint, would probably be Pizzeria Simulator. But that's because I had a lot of fun in the actual simulation portion of the game, which I kind of wish was expanded upon, because after that, there was the spin-off game, Ultimate Custom Night, where you had almost every single animatronic in the series, and you could set how aggressive they were. But like one of the things he kicked around as an idea was a limitless simulator mode where you could just build a pizzeria and not have the horror part. And I was like, that would have been so cool. I want to build my own like Freddy Fazbear franchise. That would be like a great idea for a game. But alas,
you're kind of feeling your feelings are how I feel about whenever I play Live Alive's Pogo chapter or the prehistoric bits of Chrono Trigger, and I'm like, I really just want to be Flint the Time Detective, like hitting people with my rock club and being like, ooh, me am caveman, me fight dinosaurs, as like a cool JRPG. I mean, that's just like, that's such a cool idea, and yet no one ever wants to do that. It's always really lame fantasy in Dragon Quest world.
Yeah. So. No, I feel that. And see, that's the thing is like there were little bite-sized installments and he was really passionate about the idea. And the thing is like I kind of call a lot of the middle games like 4 Sister Location, and to some greater or lesser extent Pizzeria Simulator did too. Like that's the retcon era where he wanted to end it so much sooner that certain things just kind of remained hanging in the air. So it felt like he just kind of had to make some compensatory choices. Like, I still think they're good. Like, FNAF 4 is intense. If you want, like, a really scary game, like, FNAF 4 is a good choice. If you want a mechanically challenging game, Sister Location is certainly that. And, again, Pizzeria Simulator is just, like, my favorite overall. But, like, the little pieces, like, the first couple games, like, up until FNAF World, were coming out within 3 and 4 months of each other. This dude was uploading, like, Zed Technician at the time. It was crazy. And being there watching it happen was kind of magical because, like, you guys at home got to understand that most of the Tomobros are in their, like, early mid-30s or, like, at the very youngest in their late 20s. So it's like, for us, like, we're supposed to be more established. But, like, Scott didn't come into his own till his late 30s after he was married and had kids and several failures under his belt already. So seeing this, like, I don't know if rags to riches is the correct way to put it for this one. But the fact that he took something he was passionate about and he just ran with it. And it was an incredible result. So seeing it,
I think,
yeah,
like, I guess what you're trying to say is that he got recognition for something that he was passionate about.
Yeah. And I think the most important takeaway of the story is, like, he was older. He was established. And sometimes that's how those success stories happen. Not everyone has their life made and figured out in their early 20s. Though there does seem to be some level of societal expectation that you will. Realistically speaking, a lot of these people don't become famous or successful until they've already had a number of failures already. Scott's games were very low-key. I think the most successful one would probably be The Desolate Hope. But even then,
realistically speaking, like from what I've heard of A Desolate Hope and what I saw in FNAF World, I actually really want Desolate Hope 2. But I don't think it'll ever happen.
Okay, guys, if you've listened this far, if you've listened the hour and almost 50 minutes that we've been talking, leave a comment down below. Do you want to see me do a Let's Play of Desolate Hope? I'd have to actually learn the game. But really, really good game. Really underrated. Honestly, like, a lot of Scott's stuff was good. And just FNAF blew up in this way that I don't think he could have predicted. And, like, maybe the games were going to be different because the original Kickstarter had a goal of $10,000, which tells me that the original scope of the game was probably significantly bigger than what we got. But ultimately, the timing of the release, the boom in YouTube Let's Players, and the viral nature of the very, very secretive storytelling was something that just hadn't been done up to that point. And in the end, Scott basically got to sell the license in perpetuity and right off into the sunset of self-made man. And you know what? It's a success story that deserves to be echoed and repeated. Like, game design and game dev work is not easy. It's complicated. There's a lot of things that can go wrong, and marketing is very rarely free. But you do get these success stories, and there have been people who've become success stories because of his success stories. The likes of Bendian Ink Machine, Poppy Playtime, all of these things in the mascot horror subgenre were able to exist in the first place because Scott Cawthon paved the road ahead of them. And that's the thing. You should never stop looking for those new ideas, or ideas where like, hey, you know what would be really cool is if we did this and then did this and really make it your own. And he did it with a very simple game engine, very limited resources, and just like a bunch of ideas that he thought were really neat.
About to say, you need to learn on Unity just so you can finally make that one monster Razor game, and also your one character horror game you were joking about.
Yeah, no, I think that'd be fun. I think that'd be really good.
With like, what was it, like Cool Gorilla, and like the one anime 1980s cat girl that'll follow you around.
Yes, the Dietaku Memorial Scientific Research Lab, and it had some kind of weird, stupid acronym I forgot. And like the whole thing is you're supposed to be on like a tour of a quote unquote research facility, but everything in it is just like weird, stupid, jokey monsters that kill you in really stupid and inexplicable ways. And one of them's like a 1980s style anime cat girl who goes on the hunt, and you know she's behind you because you hear like hair metal blaring behind you and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I should work on that. That'd be funny stuff.
Yeah, I distinctly remember cool. It was like Cool Sasquatch or something like that. Cool Bigfoot.
Yeah, cool
where it was
Bigfoot.
Literally just. Yeah, it was literally just a Bigfoot, and he would hang out, and if you were around him, he wouldn't attack you, but you would be forced to sit down and watch TV with you.
Yes.
So, yeah. So the entire thing is that he's not dangerous because of himself. He's dangerous because he allows other monsters to get at you.
Yeah. And he himself is just super chill, but he's a distraction. Yeah. No, I should work on that. There's a lot of potential there. And speaking of weird game ideas, like I had the idea of doing an infinite shooter using the Tomobros and our established characters as characters that you could unlock in the game. And I don't know exactly how that sort of thing would work. I feel like that one might be easier to design, honestly, but we'll see.
Oh, so like a Vampire Survivors type thing,
right? Yeah, where like you auto fire. You can like gain weapons and level them up, and you would unlock like the different Tomobros, or like the Council of Cool, or like Dr. Bad Doom and Sneckworth and stuff.
Oh, that'd be cute. All right, ladies and gentlemen, viewers of all ages, we need to bully Snek until the next April Fool.
Yeah, that's true. These things are getting bigger every year, so I probably need to get started early. But no, thank you. If you are still watching, like 2 hours into this video, you are a real trooper, and I hope it's because that you find FNAF or us really fascinating, preferably both. And that you just wanted to kind of to see one madman who was there from the beginning see it through, because it's been 10 years. It's hard to even like put my head around that. Like I was a very different Snek 10 years ago, and to know that it's been going on this long is crazy. Absolutely incredible. And That's great though. I love it. And so thank you if you're still watching. If you are still watching, hit the like and leave a comment down below like we asked like a couple different times. You update your old comments accordingly and make sure that you're subscribed so you never miss a one, because more great stuff is coming. We're going to have more Tomobros. Hopefully we'll get Cog and a Ranger up in here pretty soon, and maybe revive Clockwork from the dead. That'd be great. He had a bad encounter with a really, really long flight of steps, and he hasn't quite been the same ever since. So we're hoping. He was
trying to go down an upward escalator.
Yeah, and the results are still ongoing. Thank you for watching to the end. You guys are awesome. Be sure to do all that cool shilling stuff that we like so very, very much. Like, comment, subscribe, show your friends, show your dog, show your friend's dog. And we will see you guys in the next one.
I'm right behind you. Ta-da.
Thank you for listening to the Tomodachi Brothers Review Podcast, produced and recorded by the Hipster Snek, Dietaku, and Cog. Sound design and editing by executive producer Sean Taylor Brown with Cog Sound Engineering. Music written and performed by Sean Taylor Brown with Costas Vaz of Core Insight Studio on the drums. We hope you enjoyed this episode. See you next time.